Questions without notice. Are there any questions? I give the call to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, in the budget, the government had an opportunity to outline a plan to provide relief for families from the cost of living crisis. The government also had an opportunity to implement your promise to Australians to reduce their power prices by $275, and yet the government did nothing. If the government does have a plan to help Australians, why hasn't it been announced by now? Why, after 6 months, has this Prime Minister left Australian families and businesses waiting?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Well, I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his question. He speaks about 6 months in office, and indeed we have been in government for 6 months. And 6 months ago, what we inherited was the largest deficit since the Second World War and $1 trillion of debt.
Member for Deakin will cease interjecting.
We inherited sluggish economic growth, an economy that wasn't growing like it used to. We inherited productivity going backwards. We inherited declining business investment, and we inherited widespread skills shortages which were holding businesses back. We inherited flatlining wages. Many Australians hadn't received a decent pay rise in almost a decade, in spite of working longer hours and working harder. More Australians in insecure work than ever before. We framed a budget through the Treasurer of Australia doing hard work through the ERC process to make sure that we framed a budget that did not put further pressure on inflation. Because of what is happening globally, we were responsible, and that's why we put 99% over 2 years of the revenue gains that had been made, in part because of the inflated prices of our resources, we put straight into the bottom line. But we made room as well to assist with cost of living pressures. We made room to deliver on our childcare commitments, the largest on-budget commitment that we've made that will help more than 1 million Australian families. We made room to have the first decrease in the cost of medicines since a former Labor government introduced the Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme, from $42.50 down to $30. We made room to create 180,000 fee-free TAFE places to provide for that support for people wanting to get better education and training. But importantly as well, we took action in our first 6 months to increase the inputs that are called wages, something that those opposite had a deliberate strategy of keeping wages low over their decade in office. We put forward a proposition as one of our first acts for people on the minimum wage to not go backwards. And indeed, the Fair Work Commission listened. That 5.2% increase, that dollar coin that I held up day after day during the election campaign that was going to wreck the economy, that was reckless according to those opposite. Well, it wasn't reckless, it was responsible.
Order. I give the call to the member for Reid.
Here.
My question is to the Prime Minister. What is the latest information on the case of Professor Sean Turnell, who recently returned to Australia after being wrongfully imprisoned for 2 years in Myanmar?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and it is a great honour to have Professor Sean Turnell here in the Chamber.
I give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. It is a great honour to have Professor Sean Turnell here in the chamber today with his magnificent wife, Dr Harbu. And I much enjoyed our discussion prior to question time when I welcomed him into my office. I had the pleasure of speaking with Sean when we both touched down in Bangkok just a couple of weeks ago. Indeed, less than a couple of weeks ago. As we entered the chamber here, Sean said to me that 2 weeks ago he was there in prison, incarcerated by a regime that has trashed human rights in Myanmar, and that incarcerated Professor Turnell, who was there in Myanmar giving advice to Aung San Suu Kyi, the democratically elected leader of Myanmar, on how their economy can be improved. What he endured in his 650 days of incarceration is something that no human being should have to endure. And yet he has done it with grace, and even in inhumane conditions, with profound humanity. Our relief and joy at your release are also tinged with no small amount of awe and respect at your courage, your optimism and your resilience. We are so glad, as you've seen from the response across the chamber here, to have you back. I do want to also pay tribute to Dr. Havu. As Professor Turnell said on the 7:30 interview, the magnificent interview that I would encourage everyone to watch with Sarah Ferguson the other night, this wasn't in the marriage vows. There must have been times when you felt like you were in a prison of a different nature, but your determination, your fearless advocacy and the love that powered it all proved greater than the hate and everything that you and your beloved husband were up against. What happened to Professor Turnell should never have happened. But, as he said to me in our conversations, he was so grateful for the support he received from DFAT and our consular staff. And today I want to pay tribute to those who provided those glimmers of hope with their deliveries and their advocacy. They gave him hope during dark times. I want to acknowledge the efforts of Foreign Minister Penny Wong and her team in securing his release. In particular, on behalf of Australia, a grateful nation, I thank the exceptional assistance that we received from our ASEAN partners and our other friends, including Japan, in securing Professor Turnell's release. It was a very good day. Professor Turnell struck me with his humility upon his release. It was quite extraordinary. I am so pleased that he is now looking, it must be said, a fair bit healthier after what was an awful time. Most of all, I want to thank Professor Turnell for being here today and for displaying the absolute best of the Australian spirit, the absolute best of the Australian spirit. And I thank all those from across the political spectrum, from across our community, who all campaigned so strongly and so consistently to secure the release. You are a most welcome guest, as is Dr. Havu.
And on indulgence, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I want to join with the Prime Minister's fine words and welcome our two very special guests to the chamber today, and also to their family and friends who are here to provide support. There was much excitement up in the gallery as there was here on the floor of the chamber. And I heard the Prime Minister speak yesterday at our 34 Squadron Christmas drinks about the story, Sean, of your request for the first meal, which I think was a pub meal that you requested. A pretty simple request facilitated by the Royal Australian Air Force and the fine work that they undertook. I too want to congratulate all of those officials who have been involved in this fight for a long period of time. I want to say thank you to the Prime Minister, thank you to former Prime Minister Morrison, acknowledge the work of Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong and her predecessor Marise Payne. We spent many hours around the National Security Committee table looking at every possible angle of how we could exert pressure, work with those neighbours, people in the region, across ASEAN, indeed any influence from any partner across the world, covert and overt, in providing assistance to see the early release of Sean Turnell. It went on for way too long, and we were up against a very significant adversary. And in the end, your bravery has shone through. The demeanour and the grace with which you've carried yourself, Sean, is quite remarkable, given what you've gone through and the passion that you have for the cause that you were fighting for. People less fortunate than yourself, all you desired was a better future for Myanmar and for that country to advance into the world and not to regress. And that is on display in every public appearance that you have as well. And as you point out, for your long-suffering wife as well, we just acknowledge what you as a family have gone through, the pain, the separation, the pressure that puts on individuals, on a relationship, the anxiety that it creates. But now, of course, the love that you can share, which is shared by our nation with you, and we wish you every success into the future.
And on behalf of the Parliament of Australia, a very warm welcome to Professor Turnell and his wife, Dr Hapu. And I'll give the call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. This week, the RBA Governor offered an unqualified apology to any Australian affected by his advice that interest rates would stay low. Given just months ago, the Prime Minister went even further than Governor Lowe and actually promised cheaper mortgages, why has he failed to offer the same apology to the Australian people?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for her repeat of a question. Let me go through the issue very clearly, which is the Help to Buy scheme, which is a shared equity scheme that I announced at the ALP election campaign in Perth. Is that a shared equity scheme? So if you have, bit like if you have 100% of a mortgage by yourself, then you pay 100% of the interest yourself. If you have a shared equity scheme, then by definition, a portion of that is not paid by yourself. That's right. Yep. That's what a shared equity scheme is. It is completely relevant. It is the way that it works. If you don't understand it, I suggest you talk to the New South Wales government that's implementing a scheme in the Liberal Party, or the Victorian government, or the WA government, or indeed have a look at what the former Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, had to say about such schemes in the past.
Give a call to the member for Swan.
My question is to the Minister for Early Childhood Education. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering on its promises for better access to early childhood education while also addressing the cost of living?
Give the call to the Minister for Early Education and Minister for Youth.
For Swan for her question. The member, as a mother of two young children, two very cute young children, I might add, knows very well that access to affordable early childhood education is vital to a child's development, but also vital to our economy. Mr Speaker, on May 21st, Australians voted for change, and we have not wasted a single day in office delivering that change. The Albanese government has certainly hit the ground running, delivering for Australian families and securing a better, brighter future for our children in just 6 months. We said we would make sure that all Australian children, no matter their background, could have access to the benefits of quality early childhood education and care. And we have. We said we would ease the cost of living pressures on families by making early childhood education more affordable for 1.26 million Australian families. And we have. We said we would give parents more choice, boost productivity, by ensuring that more primary caregivers could work more days, more hours and take on more study. And we have. We said we would rebuild the relationship the previous government broke with the early childhood education sector by recognising them as professionals and not just childminders. And we have. Our investment in the early years of a child's life that we have delivered through the bill that passed last week to make early childhood education and care more affordable secures a bright future for all Australian children. Because we know, the evidence tells us, that children who participate in high-quality early learning programs have better educational outcomes, better health outcomes. They have improved literacy and numeracy skills, greater school retention and higher graduation levels. Indeed, those benefits follow a child through school and well into their adulthood. And that investment is also important for our economy because it means that more primary caregivers can go to work, can add to the household budget if they so wish. It gives women and families more choice, more opportunity to increase their household income. Mr Speaker, after a decade of waste and a wasted decade, the Albanese government is delivering for Australians, just like we said we would.
I give the call to the member for Ryan.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Resources, and it's on behalf of 3 young Pacific leaders I met this week. They know, as the science says, we need to phase out coal and gas mining to save their homelands from the climate crisis. You've said that it's up to the market, but this week the market said it's planning for 12 coal mines in Queensland past 2050, with 2 still operating in 2099. Do you still say the future of coal and gas should be left to the market?
Give the call to the Minister for Resources and Minister for Northern Australia.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. Well, it is true the market will dictate, the international market will dictate what coal is sold from this country, equally what gas is sold from this country, equally what iron ore is sold from this country, as it does for higher education exports, for all the things we export. For commodities themselves, they of course support this economy and have done for many years, coal indeed since 1801. And I accept your comments about the people that you met with, and of course their concerns are entirely justified, and we share their concerns, and that's why this government is taking action on climate change. We have legislated targets in this place, and I know you and others here have supported them. Obviously not everyone, but certainly enough people to make sure that that legislation passed. This government is committed to net zero emissions by 2050. The Minister for Climate Change and Energy is right now working on the very important reform to the safeguards mechanism. We'll make sure that all of those high-emitting industries in this nation do reduce their emissions so that we can reach net zero emissions by 2050. The truth is, as well, of course, other nations have chosen to reach net zero emissions well before this country did. Japan, Korea were all ahead of this country in making that pledge. These are the countries that continue to purchase our coal and our gas and also iron ore. And 2 of those things make, of course, the all-important steel, which will be required for the infrastructure right around the world, including in rebuilding the new capital of Indonesia. So the commodities of Australia will build the future of our region, and with our region, whether it be the Pacific or North Asia, Southeast Asian nations, we'll also work together to combat climate change so there is a future for all our children and all our people.
Give the call to the member for Holt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. In its first 6 months, how has the Albanese Labor government acted to manage the economy in the interest of Australians? What policies and approaches have been changed?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and thanks to the member for Holt for another important question. She is a warrior for working Australians and the vulnerable in her community, and once again asking about an important matter. The government changed hands just over 6 months ago at a time of slowing global growth, a war in Europe causing havoc in energy markets, feeding high and rising inflation and rising interest rates around the world. And since then, these global challenges have intensified, putting more pressure on Australia, on our economy and on Australians. And when a bad government hit the fence in May, Mr Speaker, it was replaced by a new government prepared to take these big economic challenges seriously, to talk up to people, not talk down to them, not spray money around and make inflation worse, not sit on our hands while the skills crisis intensifies, not pursue a policy of deliberate wage stagnation, not ignore the big challenges in energy and aged care and in the budget. These were the defining features and the defining failures of a decade of economic mismanagement, Mr Speaker, and they made us more vulnerable to the sorts of international shocks we're seeing in the global economy. So the past 6 months have been about cleaning up the mess left to us, making the budget more responsible, making our economy more resilient and delivering for Australians. Mr Speaker, we said we'd deliver cheaper childcare and we delivered. We said we would deliver cheaper medicines and we delivered. We said we'd deliver fee-free TAFE and we delivered. We said we would give young people more chances to get a degree and we are delivering that as well. We said we would tackle Australia's housing affordability challenges and we are delivering. We said we would invest in cheaper and cleaner energy and we are doing that as well. We said we would recognise the vast economic opportunities of a better national broadband network and we are delivering that as well. We said we would fix the aged care crisis and we are. We said we would bring manufacturing back with the National Reconstruction Fund and we are. And, Speaker, we said we would get wages moving again and that's exactly what we are delivering. By backing an increase to the minimum and award wages, done. By backing a wage increase for aged care workers and paying for it, done and getting it done. And by fixing a broken bargaining system, and we are delivering that as well. We said we would do these things and we are, because we told the Australian people we would put them front and centre again. We would take their pressures seriously and we would build a better future together, and that is exactly what we are delivering.
Members will cease banging their desks. It's highly disorderly. I mean it. Give the call to the member. Order. When the House comes to order, the member for Lindsay will be heard in absolute silence. And give her the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Before the last election, you promised Australians 97 times you would lower their energy bills by $275. Since then, you've been asked 26 times in this place whether you stand by that commitment, and on each occasion you have refused to answer. Why have you broken this solemn promise you made to Australian households and businesses?
Order. The member for Bruce. I give the call to the Prime Minister. Member for Fairfax.
I thank the member for her question and for the excitement she's creating on her side of the House. Waking them up over there, waking them up over there. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Can I say this? That there are two fundamental issues that the government is dealing with. One of those, and you might be aware of it, it gets a bit of attention from time to time, is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And what the Russian invasion of Ukraine—
The Leader of the Opposition will cease interjecting.
The louder he yells, Mr Speaker, the louder he yells, the more frustrated he is.
The Prime Minister will return to the question.
So the fact is that the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which
the Leader of the Opposition— Order. The Prime Minister will take a pause. There's far too much more. I deliberately said I wanted to hear the member for Lindsay in silence. The Prime Minister deserves the same respects. The House will come to order and he will be heard in silence. Give him the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I will take the interjection from the opposition leader, who just interjected, as he does consistently, which is that the Russian invasion of Ukraine occurred before we released our energy policy, which was, in fact, in December of 2021. The war The war began in 2022. In 2022.
The Prime Minister will pause and I will hear— Order! Members on my right. The member for Deakin. I'll hear the Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
Well, Mr Speaker, on relevance, the Prime Minister made a promise on 97 occasions.
Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. You don't have the call. Order. The Leader of the Opposition will cease interjecting. I want some order in the House, and I call the Prime Minister.
I'll give the Leader of the Opposition
Manager
a
of Opposition business.
Which is, if you're going to interject across the chamber, make sure you're prepared to stand by your interjections. Whether it's yapoon and yapping, or whether it's when the war began with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And as a direct result of the Russian invasion,
the member for Fairfax, if he continues to yell, he will be warned, as will the member for Groom. The member for Lyons, the member for O'Connor is warned. The Prime Minister has the call and will be heard in silence.
As a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you have had global energy prices rise. That is a global phenomenon that has impacted,
The member for Deakin is warned.
That has impacted on gas and has impacted on coal prices. There are some advantages that Australia has in terms of the revenues that have been increased, which were reflected in the budget that was brought down in October. But that global response has had an impact here. And it's had an impact here because what we hadn't done is to reserve domestic gas, except for in Western Australia, where the Carpenter government showed vision well in advance, of course opposed by the Liberal Party. And what we also are suffering from is our exposure to international prices as a result of a failure to create an environment which encouraged investment here in our new energy sources. That's why we had 4 units of energy leave for every 1 unit that was created.
The time has expired. The member for Werriwa.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. What actions has the government and the parliament taken to get wages moving?
Give the call to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations and the Minister for Arts.
Thanks very much, Speaker. And I thank the member for her question and for her dedication to getting wages moving for working people in this country. We said that we'd act to get wages moving, and we have delivered. We said that we would act on the annual wage review. Those opposite said the sky would fall in. Workers, as a result of the award system around the country, are now being paid more as a result of the action that the government took. We said that we would act on the aged care review. Those opposite, when they were in government, said the government shouldn't even make a submission saying that aged care workers deserve a pay rise. This government said that we should. We did, and we've had the decision, the first part of the decisions from the Commission backing a wage increase for people who work in the aged care sector. But we've also argued that you need to also change the law to get wages moving. And those opposite delayed for 10 years while they deliberately tried to keep wages low. And in the Senate right now, they are continuing to try to delay getting wages moving with the Secure Jobs Better Pay bill. There are 19 amendments to be debated in the Senate, 19 amendments that have been put forward. In 9 hours of debate, because of the behaviour principally of Senator Cash, how many amendments do you think the Senate's got through?
How many?
Zero. In 9 hours. So you might want to do the maths on how likely they're trying to delay this, how long they'll try to keep this going. In 9 hours of debate, those opposite are doing everything they can as if 10 years of delay wasn't enough. They want to now delay every extra minute, every extra hour they possibly can. Well, this government's view is 10 years of delay is long enough. People should not have to wait longer for gender equality to be an objective of the Fair Work Act. People should not have to wait longer for the sunsetting of agreements that have been in place since the work choices era. People should not have to wait longer for a bargaining system that works and gets wages moving. People should not have to wait longer for the banning of pay secrecy clauses. People should not have to wait longer for it to be illegal to advertise a job for less than the legal minimum. Those opposite dedicated 10 years to keeping wages deliberately low. And once Secure Jobs Better Pay goes through, we will have getting wages moving as a deliberate design feature of this government.
Before I call the member for New England, I'd like to inform the House that present in the Distinguished Visitors Gallery today is His Excellency President Hugh of the National Assembly of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam and the official delegation. It's an honour to have you here in our parliament, and on behalf of the House, I extend a warm welcome to you all. Give the call to the honourable member for New England.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. I refer to the government report based on October data titled Estimated Impacts of CFPS, which is coal-fired power stations, and associated coal mine closures. Do you acknowledge the report has been compiled, and will you release it?
I'll give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his question. And I think all ministers would expect a question on something that was on the front page of the newspaper. So no surprises there. Congratulations for getting to it when it was on the front page of yesterday's newspaper, Mr Speaker. And congratulations for that. And that's actually the least of the problems with the question, Mr Speaker. That's the least of the problems. Of course, the document the honourable member refers to does refer to the closure of Liddell Power Station and Bayswater Power Station. Liddell's closure was announced in 2015 and Bayswater was announced in February this year, Mr Speaker. Two common facts about those closures were that we weren't in office at the time, Mr Speaker. Two common facts about that are that those opposite were in charge at the time those were announced.
The Minister will take a break. Order. Members on my right. The Assistant Treasurer. And I'll hear from the member for New England.
Mr Speaker, I refer to Standing Order 104 Part A, which is quite exact, that he must be directly relevant to the question. At this stage, he has not been directly relevant as to whether the report has been compiled, and will he release it?
The Shadow Minister will resume his seat. The Minister is in less than 1 minute into his question. He is being directly relevant by referring to the report, and I'll ask him. The member for Wannon is warned. The member for Wannon has a habit of just going off script when he feels like it. And I want to warn all members. This behaviour continues. People will leave the chamber. It may be the last day, but you will leave the chamber. The member for Wannon will leave the chamber under 94A. I can't be clearer. If someone is warned, that means rein it in. We give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
And to be fair to the honourable member who asked the question, he had a plan for Liddell. He planned to nationalise the Liddell Power Station, Mr Speaker. If only he was in a job where he could have done something about that. I mean, if only he had a role in the government, Mr Speaker, where he could have made a decision. The former Minister for Energy had a plan for Bayswater when it was announced the closure. He issued a press release saying the Morrison government expects the market to step up That was his big play on the market to step up to deal with the closure of Bayswater. That's all he had. I guess that was better. That was better than the closure of the Eraring power station, where the minister didn't even know it was being closed until he read it in the newspaper. That was the level of trust between the New South Wales Energy Minister and the Federal Energy Minister. The New South Wales Energy Minister, the Liberal minister, was involved in the planning of the closure. He didn't trust the Federal Minister to tell him. Now, we know that regions are going through economic change. None more so than the Hunter, Mr Speaker. None more so than the Hunter going through economic change. That's why we have plans. Those opposite don't get it. We saw the cosplay coal mine senator, Senator Canavan, in the Hunter the other week. He tweeted, he said, at Liddell Power Station, thanking the workers, a picture of the power station. It was Bayswater Power Station, Mr Speaker. That's how much they understand. I tell you who does know the Hunter, the member for Hunter, and the member for Patterson, and the member for Shortland, the member for Newcastle, because they're delivering. They're delivering an upgrade to the Newcastle airport. They're delivering the Muswellbrook bypass. They're delivering the Muswellbrook town centre upgrade. We're delivering. The member for Patterson and I are delivering for MGA Thermal $1.3 million to support them, which was delivered today. That's what delivery looks like, Mr Speaker. What that side of the House looked like was a whole lot of words and a whole lot of nothing.
The member for Kennedy is seeking the call.
I think I've ever raised a point of order before, Mr Speaker. But, you know, there are 5 power stations closing. The question is asked about—
Resume your seat. I appreciate the member's feedback, but this is not the time to give it. Order. Order. I'll hear from the member for Lalor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Government Services. I refer to the minister's previous answer regarding government contracts and further media reports this morning. What more information has emerged, and what are the circumstances and performance of the relevant ICT contracts in the minister's portfolio, including any probity issues?
Call to the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme and the Minister for Government Services.
The new revelations in today's media are concerning. Since last week, I've ascertained the following. 4 contracts were issued to Infosys to a total value of $274 million to upgrade payment software and human services, called the ECE project. It's still going. The timeline for ECE is as follows. 2 October 2018, ECE tender opens. 3 companies, including Infosys, shortlisted. 29 May 2019, member for Fadden appointed Minister for Human Services and NDIS. 26 June 2019, leaked emails reveal Minister meets Infosys and his good friend David Milo, a paid consultant to Infosys in Sydney. 2 July 2019, final evaluation submitted. Negotiations as to value and period of contract continued for another 4 months. 8 November 2019, Infosys finally awarded contract for first of 4 contracts valued $18 million. 19 November 2019, Minister meets Infosys. 30 December 2019, Minister meets friend Milo at Gold Coast, triggers email from Milo saying Minister gave insights on progress of Infosys and future opportunities. 1 February 2020, Minister guest speaker at Infosys conference at Melbourne Park on afternoon of the Australian Open finals. 1 July 2020, Infosys awarded a further $142 million contract. At the same time, wheels start to come off the project. It has to be overhauled, and one of the unsuccessful tenderers called in to resuscitate the project. In light of these facts and other materials from the Synergy 360 papers, I've asked agencies a range of questions, including: did the former minister ever alert the department he was meeting Synergy 360 and/or Infosys up to and after its successful bid? Were unsuccessful rival ECE bidders, IBM and Accenture, ever notified of the member for Fadden's meetings with an Infosys consultant? What, if any, were communications between the minister or other persons in his personal office and Services Australia and Department about the progress of the ECE contract pre- and post-Infosys being awarded the contract? Were the status reports of the ECE project provided at least monthly to Minister Robert and any of his personal staff? What, if any, contracts were awarded to Synergy 360 clients in areas of responsibility of Minister Roberts, including but not limited to Delve, Adobe, Infosys and Salesforce? And finally, I remind members of Parliament and the member for Fadden, after an unfortunate development this morning, please come through my office if you have any requests of the relevant agencies Do not do what you did this morning and inappropriately task and pressure public servants who are no longer your ministerial responsibility.
Order. Order. Members on my right will come to order. The member for Hunter. Order. The members on my right will cease interjecting. Give the call to the member for Dawson.
My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. In the last 3 months, power prices for irrigated cane growers in the Burdekin have escalated 126%. That amounts to $105 per hectare per month. Why are the North Queensland cane growers having to pay for Labor's broken promise to lower electricity prices by $275?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. And the member refers to events over the last 12 months. A few things have happened over the last 12 months, particularly this year when Russia invaded Ukraine. Mr Speaker, that particularly happened. I'm sure that the former Minister for Defence is right across all the details about when and how that happened, Mr Speaker. Another thing that's happened is the impact of that, and we see thermal coal today trading at $534 a tonne, Mr Speaker, compared to $286 a tonne last December. So, of course, these things are going to have it.
The member for Dawson will need to state clearly his point of order.
Point of order. I clearly said 3 months, and straight away we're going into 12 months.
Resume your seat. That is not a point. That is not a point of order. That is not a point of order. Resume your seat. If you do that again, you won't be here much longer. I'll give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
So, Mr Speaker, the government's approach is twofold. Firstly, in the short term, senior ministers are working very closely together to ensure that the impacts of the Russian invasion do not flow through to industries and businesses without government response and protection. Mr Speaker, that's how this side of the House works it through, carefully and methodically. And we also continue with our medium-term plans to ensure that the cheapest form of energy, renewable energy, becomes a greater part of our grid, Mr Speaker. And nowhere benefits more from that program than the regions of Australia, including North Queensland, Mr Speaker, because the regions will power a renewable Australia, Mr Speaker. They'll create hundreds of thousands of jobs and lower power prices across Australia because we believe in investing in the regions. Now, we know the opposition has a different view, Mr Speaker. We had a ministerial statement this morning. The Shadow Minister responded to me and he talked about low-cost nuclear energy, Mr Speaker. That's their low-cost nuclear energy was their plan. We had their seminar last week, their uneconomic atomic frolic, Mr Speaker, that they had last week, promoting nuclear energy. We know that AEMO and the CSIRO say that nuclear energy, small modular reactors, will cost thousands of dollars a kilowatt.
The Leader of the Nationals will cease interjecting.
With 80 reactors, which is what they need, $400 billion, or 17% of GDP, Mr Speaker, which is 30 times more than the government spent last year on transport and communications, Mr Speaker, and over 10 times more what we spent on defence. But it's okay. The opposition has a plan, because the member for Fairfax has announced that the CSIRO is wrong, Mr Speaker. That's their plan. He's going to wander down to the CSIRO head office and say, sorry, scientists, economists, you are incorrect, Mr Speaker. That's their plan. They're going to assume nuclear becomes real quick because the member for Fairfax is an economics denier when it comes to nuclear energy.
Member for Fairfax, if you interject one more time, you won't be here. I'm going to give the call to the member for Higgins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health and Aged Care. How is the Albanese Labor government strengthening Medicare after previous neglect? And how is the government delivering better health care for all Australians?
Call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question and, along with members across the chamber, for attending the World AIDS Day breakfast with me this morning. I also want to thank her for her service on the front line as an infectious diseases physician in the darkest days of the pandemic down in Melbourne. Mr Speaker, in just 6 months, the Albanese government has hit the ground running to deliver better Medicare services for millions of Australians. We said we'd cut the price of medicines for millions of Australians, and we've delivered. On the 1st of January, we will deliver the largest cut to the price of medicines in the 75-year history of the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme, putting $200 million every single year back into the pockets of hard-working Australians. In July, we slashed the maximum amount that pensioners and concession card holders would pay for their medicines by 25%. And in September, we cut the price of more than 2,000 brands of medicines, putting $130 million back into the pockets of Australian patients. And, Mr Speaker, since July, we've added 54 new and extended listings to the PBS. We said we'd expand access to constant glucose monitoring devices for all Australians living with type 1 diabetes, and, Mr Speaker, we delivered. We said we'd subsidise access to the next generation Omnipod insulin pumps, and, Mr Speaker, we delivered. Mr Speaker, we said we'd work to close the gap in First Nations health, and we've delivered 500 First Nations health workers, funding to combat rheumatic heart disease and 34-chair dialysis units all through the October budget. We expanded access to life-saving antivirals for COVID, particularly for over 70s, and eligibility for the 4th dose of the vaccine. And we were one of the few countries to secure doses of the 3rd-generation monkeypox virus. We said we'd crack down on cosmetic cowboys, and we've delivered. We said we'd make it easier to recruit GPs in our regions, and we've delivered. We said we'd address rural workforce shortages, and we delivered a $185 million rural workforce package in the budget in October. We said we'd fund comprehensive cancer centres in Perth and Adelaide and Brisbane, and we've delivered. We said we'd address gaps in hearing services for children in Tasmania and New South Wales, and, Mr Speaker, we've delivered. And yesterday, Mr Speaker, after 10 years of nothing happening, I announced this government's intention to make us a world leader again on tobacco control and to start the fight against vaping finally, Mr Speaker. There is still so much to do, Mr Speaker, but we are already delivering on our promise to strengthen Medicare and to cut the price of medicines.
Give the call to the honourable member for Mackellar.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Minister for Environment and Water. Minister, a renewable economy must be a circular economy. Solar panels, wind turbines and lithium batteries have an end of life, and we cannot afford to trade one environmental problem for another. According to the CSIRO, Australia is only recycling 10% of its lithium batteries. What is the government doing to ensure solar panels and lithium batteries are recycled here in Australia?
Give the call to the Minister for the Environment and Water.
Thank you so much, Mr Speaker, and thank you so much to the member for Mackellar. She's absolutely right on two fronts. Australia has to be a circular economy, and we've got a real issue with solar panels and batteries from the solar industry. Of course, it's fantastic that more people are putting solar on the roof. We've got about 3 million Australian households and businesses that have got solar panels on the roof now. They're saving money for themselves. They're saving about $1,000 a year for an average family. They've reduced emissions by close to 18 million tonnes in 2021. Fantastic achievement. And about 8% of the energy going into our national electricity grids coming from rooftop solar. Great, great, great. But we know that these systems last, a couple of decades if they're going well. And if we don't change what we're doing now, by 2030 there'll be about 250,000 tonnes of this material in landfill. Now that's bad because the panels and the batteries contain valuable metals, minerals, and we should be reusing it. It's terrible for the environment because we know that lithium batteries in particular, as they break apart, leach into the soil, not great for the soil or the environment. And it's better for jobs to recycle, about 3 recycling jobs, 3 jobs for recycling compared for every one if you're going into landfills. So better for the environment, better for the economy to recycle. So the solar industry's been on notice for years. The minister who's interjecting, the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party, she's actually an expert in recycling, backbench, front bench, backbench, front bench. She put them on notice. She put the solar industry on notice, but they never took any notice of her. So I have said that I will regulate. I will regulate. We are prepared to invest. We've set aside $250 million for recycling infrastructure, including $60 million for soft plastics. I spoke to the supermarket giants just today about soft plastics and fixing the mess of REDcycle. We're prepared to invest and we're prepared to regulate. Those opposite weren't prepared to regulate. We want to help Australians do what they want to do, which is recycle. We know there's very strong support from Australians on recycling. We want to make it as easy as possible for them to do that. And that means industry stepping up to do their share. It means being prepared to invest, and it means being prepared to regulate where those opposite weren't.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition is continually interjecting. You may not be able to help yourself, but you need to do better. I give the call to the member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government cleaning up the mess of the former government to strengthen Australia's national security?
Give the call to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence.
Well, can I thank the honourable member for her question and thank her also for finally giving Boothby a voice in this chamber. Mr Speaker, over the last 6 months, I think everyone on this side of the House has been struck by just how consequential is the moment in which we have come to office, how precarious and how complex are Australia's strategic circumstances, and how the lost decade that Australia experienced under the former coalition government could not have come at a worse time. But, Mr Speaker, in the last 6 months we have started to turn things around. Over the last 6 months I have met with 24 different defence ministers around the world. Over the last decade, those opposite had 24 different ministers in defence just here in Australia. Over the last decade, on the diplomatic front, those opposite cracked jokes, they misled presidents, they yelled at trading partners, they denied the science of climate, leaving Australia the most diminished that we have ever been in the world. Over the last 6 months, we are stabilising the relationship with China without any concessions. We have re-engaged with the Pacific with energy and credibility. We are bolstering our relationship with our alliance partner, the United States. We are deepening our historic relationship with the United Kingdom, and we are repairing a fundamentally important relationship to Australia with France. Over the last decade, those opposite left us with 28 different defence programs running a total of 97 years over time. Over the last 6 months, we have reasserted ministerial oversight in defence procurement. Over the last decade, those opposite observed that we now sit within the 10-year threat window, but then did nothing about it, shrugged their shoulders and walked off the stage.
The Deputy Prime Minister will resume his seat. The member for Moreton is getting close to leaving as well, and I will hear from the Manager of Opposition Business.
Point of order on relevance. He's forgotten the relevant fact. Which side had the lowest share of defence spending as a share of GDP since World War II?
The Manager will resume his seat. Order. When the House comes to order, it was pretty clear yesterday if that was to happen again, people would leave the chamber. Out of respect for the manager's position, that's the last time. Give the call to the Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Over the last 6 months, we have engaged in the single biggest re-evaluation of Australia's strategic posture in more than 35 years. And well may they shout, Mr Speaker, because over the last 10 years the total sum amount of defence policy on that side of the House has been shouting at the world while allowing Australia's hard power equation to diminish. And as a result, we were being left weaker. Because at the end of the day, there is a vast difference between being obsessed with the politics of defence and actually doing defence policy. Well, Mr Speaker, under the Albanese government, we are very different. Australia is back to being very very serious about defence. We are making the hard calls in relation to defence policy, making the hard decisions so that in this very difficult world we can keep Australians safe.
The lead to questions, and I give the call to the member for Chisholm. Order. The member will resume his seat just until recording is available. Reset the clock, and I'll give the call to the member for Chisholm.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. How is the Albanese Labor government providing cost of living relief for pensioners and helping them keep more money in their pockets?
Call to the Minister for Social Services.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Chisholm for that question. I know she's been advocating for cost of living relief as a key priority across her electorate. Of course, Speaker, at the Jobs and Skills Summit in September, we said as a government we would deliver more incentives for pensioners to take up more work and help with labour shortages. And I'm very pleased to tell you today and inform the House that we have delivered. Aged pensioners can now earn more without affecting their pension. Today, the Albanese Labor government's $4,000 work bonus income boost has come into effect. We're making this process easier for pensioners. They won't need to do a thing. This temporary increase will automatically be credited to eligible work bonus income banks up front, so they'll be able to earn an additional $4,000 from employment income up to the 31st of December. This change gives more flexibility for those who are already working to take up extra work. Now, we know a lot of pensioners want to enjoy their retirement and don't want to do that extra work. But for those that do, this immediate top-up to the work bonus income comes at a great time for those wanting to take some short-term seasonal work, particularly those that want to bring some Christmas cheer to young children in shopping centres all around Australia. Now, this is just one of the measures that this government has delivered. Of course, we said we would ease the cost of living pressure and help older Australians keep more money in their pockets. And in the lead-up to the election, we said we would freeze the social security deeming rates, and we have delivered on this, freezing them at their current rate for 2 years to the 30th of June 2024. This protects around 900,000 aged pensioners and other pension recipients from the impact that deeming rates can have on their pension rates. Last month, we passed legislation to increase the income limits for those on the Commonwealth Health Seniors Card, extending access to an additional 50,000 self-funded retirees who will benefit from cheaper access to medicines and healthcare. And in just the first 2 weeks, I'm really pleased to report to the House that we saw around 10,000 senior Australians put in their application for one of these cards, a pleasing uptick in the numbers compared to the previous period. Now, we said we'd deliver cost of living relief, and we have. We've also delivered on our commitment to make it easier for pensioners selling and buying a new home through our legislation going through the Parliament on downsizing. We are delivering tangible help for older Australians to help them get by in times where cost of living and other challenges are making it difficult for them. Older Australians have worked hard. They deserve a government that will deliver for them, and that's what we are doing.
Give the call to the member. The member for Page is warned. Give the call to the member for Curtin.
My question is for the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. The Climate Change Authority report tabled today says governments are faced with difficult decisions because if someone won't do their fair share, someone else has to make up the difference. If new fossil fuel projects like Browse are to be approved, will it be other industrial sectors or households who will make up the difference in emissions reduction?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for her question, and I thank her referring to the Climate Change Authority advice, which I tabled in the House earlier today, and I recommend to all honourable members. It's a very good report, together with the other documents I tabled. And I think the Climate Change Authority advice I tabled underlines the size of the challenge. I think the honourable member would agree. We've had 12 million tonnes average emissions reduction over the last decade. We need to hit 17 million tonnes from today and every year in order to meet our targets, in order to meet net zero. That is a big task. but the government's determination, and I'm sure the country's determination, is up for that task. In relation to the honourable member's question, what the government intends to do is exactly what we promised to do, and that is to reform the safeguards mechanism to drive down emissions in existing facilities and in all facilities. We will not reduce emissions in Australia unless we get them down from our 200 biggest emitters. That is the case. And yesterday I introduced the Safeguards Mechanism Reform Bill into the House. That's one small part of the reform, although it was, to be fair, something the previous government was planning to do. So I would expect them to support it. I would expect them to support it, given they actually promised to do it. But we'll see what they do. But that is one small part of the reforms. I'll be issuing a draft regulation in coming weeks which will outline the government's approach following a very extensive consultation process, which includes how to deal with new entrants into the safeguards facility, whether they be entrants which go over the 100,000-tonne limit for the first time, or they be greenfields entrants. It will explain all those details after 240 submissions, which the government has very extensively gone through. I think I'm right in saying the honourable member put in a submission, which I read and which was well thought out. And of course, I look forward to issuing that draft regulation, and I will take questions from honourable members here in the House or privately.
The call to the member for Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development. How has the Albanese Labor government delivered on its infrastructure commitments?
The call to the Minister for Infrastructure.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and thanks very much to the member for Robertson for the question. And I'm very happy to report that the last 6 months can be summed up in one word, and that's in delivery. Since May, I've been to every single corner of this country, from the Torres Strait to Tasmania, from the south-east coast to Perth, and just about everywhere in between. In the member's own electorate, I've stood with him as we've talked about our commitment to deliver Avoca Drive, an important project for communities across his region. In New South Wales, I've stood with the member for Hunter as we delivered the funding needed for Coulsons Creek Road and the Muswellbrook bypass. I've stood in the Torres Strait with Senator Nita Green as we've delivered funding needed for maritime infrastructure and jetties, and in Cairns as we deliver city-shaping projects along with Exit 49 in south-east Queensland and launching the new electric refueller at Brisbane Airport. I've stood in Yuendamu with the member for Lingiari as we upgrade the Tanami, and I've flown over Middle Arm with the member for Solomon to inspect a site that will create thousands of jobs in the Northern Territory. I've been to the Bridgewater Bridge, the Burnie Shiploader and UTAS in Launceston. I've joined our members in the West in the High Wycombe Community Hub, Metronet and Flynn Drive in Wanneroo. And in Victoria, we're getting started on delivering with the Victorian Government the Suburban Rail Loop, a project overwhelmingly backed by Victorian voters not once, not twice, but 3 times at the polls now. And of course I've been here in Canberra, not just here only for Parliament, but also to inspect the light rail we'll deliver in partnership with the ACT government. But not only are we delivering on our promises to build a better future, we've delivered on our promises to clean up the mess left by 9 long years of a wasted coalition government. We've ended the worst of the rorts, closing down the Commuter Car Park Fund, replacing the Building Better Regions Fund with 2 new funds totalling $1 billion that regional communities can actually rely on across all regions, not just some. We're supporting cities by delivering a national urban policy framework, establishing the Cities and Suburbs Unit, renewing the Urban Policy Forum and bringing back the State of the Cities report. We're reforming Infrastructure Australia, that important economic advisory body so trashed by those opposite. We've ended the political fights with states and territories, partnering with them to deliver the projects that matter to communities right the way across this country. We're creating a strategic fleet to regrow Australian shipping, and we're working on an aviation white paper to create and grow jobs in that sector. And we've started the work to get inland rail back on track and high-speed rail here in this country. It's been a busy but productive 6 months. The Australian people voted for a better future. It's one we're determined to keep on delivering.
Put the call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I ask further questions to be placed on the notice paper.